Good day. My name is Reg Hunter. I'm with Fiatech. This discussion today is a PAT team meeting related to interactive project planning. I'll give you the pedigree behind why it exists and how it came into being and its relationships to other productivity advancement targets. Thank you for coming. The image on the left is kind of an analogy of what I think in some ways represents our industry. And a lot of times we tend to be complacent and we tend to want to see how things go for someone else. And so we vicariously live through other people's behaviors. And that's kind of what Fiatech's about. Fiatech is discovering new worlds and exploring new technologies and new ways of doing things that could be very positive and achieve productivity advancement in the industry. And so the challenge we always face within Fiatech is when we're at the leading edge, people tend to observe rather than get involved. So thank you very much for calling in. You're one of the participants in Fiatech. You're helping us to discover new worlds and find new ways of doing things. So thanks for participating today and also watching this video as we go forward. If you have any questions or comments, please just go ahead and interrupt me with them, and I'll be happy to answer them. Productivity advancement targets has received a lot of attention, and there's been a number of publications that relate to this. ENR had a publication about it, and also Built World had a couple of publications about it. And it kind of relates to this notion that, given all the technologies that have emerged over the years and for our industry and augmented reality and drones and all these other things, how come we haven't seen a substantive improvement in productivity? And that's sort of a challenge. And we put forward arguments about world of worlds where specialization continues to be gaining more and more momentum, but it's at the expense of sensitivity, overall project performance. And as a consequence, that could explain in large part why the productivity of our industry hasn't improved. I think you couple that with this notion about change readiness and the reluctance on the part of stakeholders within the industry to sincerely embrace technology and have it become our process improvement and change and have it become part of the fabric of how they execute things moving forward. I think those in combination help to explain why our productivity hasn't substantially improved. So today's discussion is a Slack team discussion or productivity advancement target discussion. It relates to PAT number 3. PAT number 3 is through interactive project planning, capture 25% improvement in project cost and schedule predictability. With that in mind, there's 47 success enablers. I'll explain sort of what those are about, but these are the attributes that are indicative of high performance teams that allow them to achieve this type of performance improvement. And it goes without saying that essentially no entity, no stakeholders within our industry has really adopted and is using all these behaviors. But if it is arguably that pretty much every behavior that we identified, which is another way of saying success enabler, is being done by different entities within our industry. And there's a link that you've been provided, and it relates to how do you get into this environment to open up dialogue with your peers. It's shown here. It's PAT-3. And when you sign in, it'll give you access if you're a Fiatech member. If you're not a Fiatech member, I'll be sending you a link to a YouTube video of this discussion. So, Bob, this is a new slide. Maybe you can introduce yourself, but let me explain it first. And I'll give you the pedigree in a second about it. But there's interactive project planning, which in a sense, what interactive project planning is the coalescing of skills, knowledge, and expertise related to executing a project from an owner's perspective. And so the idea is you get all these individuals that are clearly accountable, clearly responsible, directly involved in performing on the project, not some periphery people that were involved in the negotiations, things like that. These are the real workers, the guys that roll up their sleeves and immerse themselves. And this project planning essentially gets them into a war room, face-to-face context, and they establish, first off, they get to know each other. They get to know roles and responsibilities. They get to know who's going to be responsible for what. And they start culling through the project and talking about what needs to happen before other predecessors and and successors and who needs to deliver what and what the dependencies are. And by doing that, what you've done is you've elevated sensitivity to the overall project objective, the capital project objective, and at the same time you help raise awareness of whose turn is it to deliver things that can ensure the project moves along successfully. And as all of us know, most capital projects, easily more than 50% of all capital projects overrun on cost and schedule. And the idea behind this is if you get everyone together early, right at the kickoff of a project, you can at least have a chance to define who's going to be doing what and what they need in order to be successful. And having said that, though, there's another productivity advancement target, number 4, which is integrated project management. And there's really a convergence here, because that's the folks, the EPC folks, that actually take project plans, develop schedules, detailed schedules, and execute and monitor and coordinate all the activities associated with making the project move forward in a smooth and succinct and in a successful way. So there's really sort of a distinction here, but I'd like to make the point that this may at some point be combined, but interactive project planning actually is something that can be owner driven, because right at the onset, the owners need to say, we need to get everyone together and talk about our project that we're funding you. Here's what we want you to do. Here's what we want you to deliver. Here's how we want you to migrate all of these observations and activities into executable form and do that. So there's sort of a blur between what interactive project planning is involved in, what integrated project management is, but the blur is based on the vantage point of the owners versus the EPCs. So Bob, do you have some comments about this?
Sure. I'm Bob Weibel. I'm the Fiatech Senior Project Manager, and I have responsibility for PAT4 Integrated Project Management. And what Reg said is 100% true. One of the things we're trying to do with the productivity advancement target teams is show the interrelationship between the work of the owner, the EPC, and the service providers in addressing these targets. And so very clearly, PAT3 and PAT4 work hand in hand. And at some point in time, we may very well merge them into a single work group or hold occasionally some joint sessions. In fact, we have structured the leadership forum coming up next month so that the interactive project planning session is held immediately before the one on integrated project management. So you literally can stay in the same room and move between the two topics. And you'll see that if you go to the enablers for both PAT3 and then PAT4, you'll see very strong commonalities and interrelationships in those enablers that in interactive project planning, some of those enablers really do stress the things of the owners, whereas you see kind of the flip side a little further down the process through integrated project management, you see some of those same enablers emerging more in the EPC context. So we look forward to working with those of you on the PAT3 team together with your colleagues who are on the PAT4 team. Thanks, Reg.
Yep, thanks. Yeah, and I mean, there's lots of different ways to internalize what you see here, but I kind of think that PAT4, when Bob was talking here, it's really the reduction to practice. So if you lay out a plan, a strategy, a campaign related to ensuring projects executed successfully, that's a very short-lived thing. It's right at the beginning of launch of a project. But reduction to practice really falls into PAT number 4. So how are you going to really realize this? How are you going to internalize this within your operations and communicate it within the stakeholders and participants on the projects to ensure that you're in lockstep with what the expectations were that were laid out by the subject matter experts early on? And if you deviate from that, how do you go about making sure that everyone understands that something didn't happen the way it should have and that the corrective action is identified and performed in a timely manner? Thank you, Bob. So, as Bob said, and I just said too, obviously, that PAT3 and PAT4, there's a very tight coupling between them. It has to do with its point of origin. The leadership initiatives, there's a number of different ones. There's 8. There's industry owners and operators that have leadership initiatives, and there's project management that have leadership initiatives. And this is the boundary between what we've been talking about. And there's through interactive project planning, which is basically everybody, but the chaperoned heavily by owners because they realize that to get people to articulate what they're going to do is critical. and then it's what are we going to do to essentially satisfy the interactive project planning outcomes and deliverables from an execution standpoint, which falls into the project management side. So that's sort of what we're talking about. And as you can see here, there's the first 6 of the productivity advancement targets that are listed along with the percentages. What's interesting about these percentages is that you can't just apply the percentages to everything you're doing. What these percentages represent is an aggregated influence associated expectations that's been essentially confirmed by various owners as well as subject matter experts that this is an achievable number against the entire industry, not specific projects and specific entities, because some companies may be very strong in document control while other companies are very weak in that area but very strong in information flows. So it depends on the nature of your organization to what extent these percentages apply. So the best way to look at these percentages is they represent an aggregate impact on the entire capital project industry. So these are the remaining of the 12 productivity advancement targets. You can see that we go through into material management, construction, lifecycle information management, handover to operations, and emerging systems and technologies. One of the points on PAT number 11, which is green near the bottom of the screen here, is we were talking about handover, and one of the owners pointed out that they really want to have processes and activities in place that actually don't use that term anymore. They want it to be so clean and so smooth that you start talking about seamless rollover. So the car is already moving forward effectively, and someone else takes the place of the existing drivers, which would be the EPCs, and starts driving it. And these new guys are the owners and the operators, and it's essentially a smooth transition. It turns out that it's very costly, much more costly than we had anticipated for handover. So the notion of seamless rollover is the desire on that. So there's a lot of success enablers within all of these productivity advancement targets that relate to the high performing teams organizations that I've been talking about. So I've kind of touched on this already, but we have 12 productivity advancement targets. We've scrutinized and developed success enablers related to that. And now the question is how do we get there? The owners have come around to essentially acknowledging that they can't, even though they fund and cover the cost overrun situations and things like that, and they desperately want to be able to do things more efficiently and more quickly, they've tended to be perhaps a little bit more complacent than they want to be, and in some respects I think that's true. And now they view these productivity advancement targets as an economic criteria and economic expectations that they can internalize and communicate within their owner organizations to help motivate. Looking here at the end of the day, here's what we want to save, and it's dramatic. Oops, sorry. So with that in mind, this kind of came about, I guess, about a year and a half ago. We started running these voice of the owner sessions, discussions that take place between owners. And so you can see 16 of them here where various topics were discussed. And so, for example, DuPont talked on number 4, talked about when they ask for all these deliverables, they were convinced that the mere activity of asking for these additional deliverables with the idea that they can have better visibility and control, they actually degraded contract execution. So it's like if you have to ask and we're having to fill out more reports, then all of a sudden we're allocating our resources to do that rather than executing the project. And so it's an interesting environment because it's owner to owner type communication that takes place, and you can see the various topics. The reason I have the 4 in red here, it relates to what we're talking about today, which is interactive project planning or reduction to practice, and also how do you go about measuring performance through interactive project planning and all these other kinds of things in project management, and the linking the world of worlds, which we've already talked about. And again, if you have any questions, please interrupt me. Whoops. So voice of the owner we invite, it's not, you don't have to be a Fiatech member, you have to be part of an owner's organization. What you see on the right hand side is a pretty current list of all the different representatives from owner organizations that we invite to the discussions. We've also set up a Slack environment, which is slack.com. You can go look at it. It's essentially a collaborative environment that allows anyone to talk with anyone else. So in this case, it's exclusively for owners. We want them to be able to communicate what they want, not and describe sort of what they see as principal challenges and things like that. So out of the gate, I think that interactive project planning, I think what you should come to terms with is, what does your company hope to achieve by being involved in this? I think it could be argued that unifying the process, setting expectations and validating it and driving it forward and having it become the fabric of how organization launches a project is beneficial. It's proving to be. Um, Essentially at the end of the day, what is the best way to realize visibility and predictability and positive control for your projects, for owners, and also for the EPCs for executing the project? If I don't know if you have yet or not, but encourage you to sign into the Slack 3 environment, review the success enablers, and help. Think it'll give you a good idea of where you want to start. We had a request on the part of one of our members. They said, well, we don't really want to divulge very candid conversations that we're having about, well, we don't do this, we don't have any capability to do this, and it's really important because that's kind of that's private. That's kind of like dirty laundry, but you really want to facilitate communication. So we set up this environment called Slack, Mirror Slack, and what it does is it lets you download the success enablers from one Slack environment, which is Fiatech's, into your own, so that you can essentially have very candid conversations within different disciplines in your organization. And we really want to encourage you to become actively involved in refining and developing solutions to IPP and the success enablers. And also, we want to encourage you to attend the Fiatech Leadership Forum next month, coming up very soon here, a couple of weeks away. The reason is there's very high power work groups established sessions that are devoted to talking about all of the targets. So where are we? How did we get here? So as I've already indicated, there's leadership initiatives on the far left. There's 8 of them. From that, we generated 12 performance advancement targets. Within those, there's an aggregate of 400 success enablers. From that, we did some general high-level economic impact analysis on an industry segment. In this case, it was a chemical market segment within the capital project industry. And we're actually at the point now where we're converging on how do we get there, which is a unified owners and operators involved with EPCs, solution providers, services providers, academics, and they're all working together to satisfy, how do we satisfy a success enabler? So we're right at the cusp between, we're motivated from an economic standpoint, but we're also creating an environment that allows us to cultivate and identify solutions. So I can't really overemphasize this enough, but so I'm doing it again. So from an industry standpoint, there's 33% decrease in costs that's been reviewed by various owners and been reviewed by various EPCs and key stakeholders. They believe that those numbers are correct from an industry segment standpoint. They also believe that 10% faster decrease in cycle time is viable. But we had talked about this in our change readiness team, which is PAT number 1. And how do you help an entity within this industry understand what the impact of those numbers are and what they're doing? And so one of the things the change readiness team, PAT number 1, is doing is we're starting to think about how do we go about developing a cost avoidance modeling guide so that any entity within the organization can decompose their existing processes in a way that they can apply these percentages to it to sort of prioritize what's important to them. And by doing that, they're able to identify what success enablers are most applicable to what their own unique needs are. So I feel like an auctioneer. Sorry. So if you have any questions, interrupt, please. So this is an archive. By the way, this is not going to be divulging the details associated with success enablers. That's Fiatech member unique. This is going to be made available to pretty much anybody who is interested, and it helps them understand what Fiatech's doing. To help you visualize this Slack environment that I'm going to be talking about, you can think about an objective, which is productivity advancement target. You can think about it being led by owners and operators with co-leaders of EPCs. What's important about that is that they have the economic motivation. Owners have an economic, but the co-leaders, the EPCs, they have the wherewithal, knowledge, relationships, and responsibility for executing the project. So it makes logical sense that they actually are the ones pulling the train forward. Then you have success enablers, which are the attributes, like I told you before. It's the fingerprint of high performance organizations. So this is sort of like what the skills and what the tendencies and what the capability and practices are that organizations have in order to achieve the productivity advancement targets. And like I've already said, no single organization has all of this, but as a whole, the industry does have the solutions. So what you really have then is the foundation, which is a flat car here, where solutions can be identified with respect to the success enablers, and they can come from either the industry or come from projects and Fiatech members. So there may be multiple solutions for each success enabler, and one solution may be preferable to another based on the circumstances of the particular entity in our industry. So I really want to emphasize that this is a very pragmatic world, okay, that we're talking about here. We don't view exclusivity on anything. The solutions are from an industrial standpoint, from the entire landscape of the capital project industry, and they can come from anywhere. So on the left-hand side, obviously solutions to success enablers can come from innovations and various owners and operators and so on, as you see on the left. But they can also come from other organizations, such as Construction Industry Institute, process industry practices, and a variety of other organizations you see on the right-hand side, even researchers and things like that. So there's no boundary for what is an acceptable and viable solution. So we have data we can share with you, but basically the industry is engaging in a number of ways. But essentially what's going on is stakeholders are looking at the success enabler touch points and identifying which ones are most impactful to them and getting involved in those. And it may be in one particular productivity advancement target or another, but it's essentially an a la carte world. They can, various success enablers resonate more strongly with an entity than others. And it varies depending on the organization, the maturity of organizations, and the market segments served, excuse me. The process for cultivating solutions can be shown here, and it gives you a rough idea of what we're talking about. You have these success enablers, and Fiatech has teams, which is what we're meeting here about. And the group is focused on the success enablers. How do we identify values and needs and refining them and identify potential solutions? So what happens is you kind of get comfortable with what a success enabler looks like and what its implications are, but then you have to really reach out to the entire industry to get a feeling for, are we missing something? Are we overlooking something? And so there's a public communication step, which is second in blue there, where you essentially provide understanding to the people that call in about what is the existing performance characteristics in the industry that you're trying to address, and then talk about a solution prospect, an overview of it, and then discuss what it is about this solution prospect that makes it viable or makes it challenging. Then you solicit input from the participants in the webinar, for example, from Fiatech, and you further refine those views into the success enablers and clarify that, and you start doing some detailed analysis of solution viability. So as you can see over time, you can see a maturing of understanding of the success enablers and an identification of potential ways to address those and significance of that and issues related to that. And as you progress, you'll finally reach a point that you'll say, this is pretty much done. Let's move to the next one. You can move on, or else you can do additional research and studies along those lines. So, I'm sorry, it says IMM here, but it should say IPP. What I'm showing you here is what the Slack environment looks like, okay? This is interactive project planning. You can see on the left-hand, this is an application that you can download, and I've provided it to you, but you can download on the left-hand side here all the different PATS selectors. You can see like there's some activities, notifications, that there's comments on these various ones. There's new and emerging technologies, and there's process streamlining, and there's interactive project management, integrated project management, and here's us. So in the middle, in the column here in purple, I guess, if the color is right on your computer, you have the various success enablers that you can click on. And you can see, if you click on any one of these, you can see what the success enablers are. So in this case, success enabler number one is, does your organization have committed and engaged leadership that understands the schedule, financial, and project team benefits of effective project planning? And are they willing to drive interactive project planning throughout the organization? So you might notionally agree that it makes sense, but is what is it going to take to get your organization on board? And you may not have the internal capabilities to do that, internal commitments to do that, but you can see in this environment, you can actually have a dialogue about, well, we've been able to do it. We've had good success with this, and we've done it this way and that way. And you can start getting reassurance from the industry that some process is working and beneficial and highly motivated. So you can hopefully start seeing the interactive value of that. And around the periphery of this, you can see that it lets you know if there's any change. You can set up accounts. You can star channels. So if you have a success enabler that's most important to you, you can essentially identify it as being a priority for you to track. You can message to groups and subgroups, and you can upload and import files and create snippets and posts. By the way, this video that I'm recording here, I'm going to be loading it into the PAT3 environment under support videos. So you'll be able to see the video on YouTube by clicking on it. You can send rich text messages, and you can upload various documents in any kind of form you want, and you can also have other applications that interface with it, like your mobile apps. So the key point, I think the key takeaway, which is on the far right-hand side, is that you can review and participate in discussion threads describing challenges and identifying viable solutions.
Reg, if I may interject here again, because of the interrelationship between PAT3 and PAT4, integrated project management, it would be great for those of you who are interested in seeing that interrelationship, if you would like access as a Fiatech member to the PAT4 site, the Slack site, please send an email to either Reg or to myself, and we'll be happy to give you that connection. And then that'll help you see the interrelationship between these PAT enablers, which indeed do interface with each other. Thanks.
Yeah, great. And what it's really kind of nice. I mean, in the morning when you're calm and the challenges of your day in and day out work hasn't hit you, you can sit down, or on the weekends I do it. Sit down with a cup of coffee, and you can see like there's someone made an entry here for integrated project management, and so there's some so I can go. You can see a marker that tells you there's some activity there, and you can go and look at it and say, oh yeah, that's right. And you can essentially go and look at, instead of reviewing things over and over again and looking for something that you hadn't seen before, it actually tells you when something new's been added. And so you can actually have a build up. What's also nice about this environment is that if you bring someone new on board, like for example, material management, and they're totally unaware of what we're talking about, they can go and click on the success enablers and read through the discussion threads and essentially come up to speed. So you don't have to invest time hoping the person captures and understands what you're saying. There's a way for them to essentially follow the chain of thought and come up to speed on it, where you aren't hoping that they understand everything you say if you're trying to jumpstart them. So there, as Bob said, there's essentially multiple Slack environments that I'm describing here. You sign up for Fiatech members. We might be able to make exception if you have subject matter knowledge in certain areas, but this is really a working environment for Fiatech members to drive out solutions in the way I just described. And so what's nice is you can just click on this. Your email domain is already recognized, and if it's not, let me know. We'll add you to it, and you can see the success enablers. So this is all the oops. So as I mentioned already, you have the ability to upload documents. You also have the ability to upload videos, and why we're going to do that with this one. What's nice about that is that here's an example of videos that we've uploaded with respect to reducing owner initiated change orders. Okay, and so there's a video that's been uploaded. It's about 5 minutes long. That analysis from a university that talks about why change orders take place, what are the causes of them, what are the types and categories of change orders, and it helps you kind of understand the landscape of what causes change orders to occur. There is another video that's been uploaded. It's about 10 minutes long from Saul Hernandez, and he's with Era Energy, and he talks about how Era Energy has been able to essentially demonstrate 70% reduction in change orders that are being initiated by owners. And it's really quite fascinating. And by the way, he talks about keeping your 3D model in lockstep with the as-built configuration almost religiously, and how he was able to achieve some dramatic reduction in rework. And as a consequence, it reduced the need for change orders and also allowed the project to move forward much more smoothly. We haven't built this video yet, but a video is on the horizon here that relates to change order ripple cost impact. Various EPCs have models that they use to anticipate the impact associated with a change order. And one of the things that was pointed out is that, if you're running a project and you say it's going to cost this much if you make this change order, there's some discussion and debate on whether or not that's appropriate. But by having a model that we all agree to that shows the attributes, characteristics, and dependencies, you're going to be able to essentially anticipate the cost. It's pretty frustrating at times, I'm sure, for EPCs that are trying to be honest about the impact of a change that are viewed as kind of inflating the cost associated with it. But the whole cost related to the ripple cost impact on a change order is dramatic. And I think that reaching consensus and understanding and coming up with a way to systematically do that is critical. So as I already mentioned, there is a way it's an interactive environment. So here's an example of that. The success enabler 1 for integrated material management is, does your organization systematically capture whole cost associated with project material management activities and compare it to should cost models to identify waste and prioritize refinement targets? So this kind of goes to the point that if you don't understand where you are, it's very difficult to be motivated to change. It's very difficult to understand, by changing, did things really get better? And so what this does is capture that point. And there is some input from Ken, a Fiatech member, and they talked about modeling tools that are used by the automotive industry to anticipate the cost of certain products that are going into the automobile based on complexity, where it's coming from, what the workforce characteristics are. And so they start having a pretty good idea of what the cost of the materials are. That's really quite interesting, but it's not quite what I described up here above. But it's sort of like, yeah, but if that's possible. So I've already reached out to them about creating a short video that explains what that is, but it's not really exactly what we're talking about. And then below from Deb, you see a message that says, we're very interested in seeing what cost models have been used to capture activities needed to run a fully functioning integrated project management system. So you can see, for example, having said all that this success enabler really cuts to the chase about how do we baseline what we're doing. And it could be something from CII, it could be something from research that a university's done, it could be influence diagrams and interactive type modeling tools that we developed within Fiatech, things like that. But you can see that you have a focus for your conversations, topics, and expectations, and you have it underscored by owners being interested in thinking that this makes a lot of sense and how do we progress forward. As I've already said, there's a number of documents that you can load up, any documents you want that relate to the subject. And so integrated material management, we uploaded a value-driven holistic approach to productivity improvement planning. This is a fairly lengthy document. It's about 100 pages, but it takes you through all the steps of material management from point of origin all the way to ongoing operations, and it points to sources of inefficiencies, and it gives you methodologies that allow you to make ROI calculations with respect to how much is it costing you now versus the impact of any new technology you're planning on using. And on the right-hand side is another study that we did at Fiatech that relates to using predictive analytics in order to anticipate the likelihood of future events. And this was in response to requests we had that advanced work packaging can't really reach out too far in a way, because by using KPIs, key performance indicators, you kind of get a feeling for what is, but you can't look far enough in the future in order to have proactive planning to correct for a problem before it happens. And we've proven that using these analytical techniques, using neural networks, you can actually anticipate the likelihood of future events depending on how good your data is out to 6 months in advance. So the pipe spool manufacturer may not have even started to make the spool, but you can say with a certain degree of confidence, like we're based on the model assumptions and this and that, we're 80% confident that your delivery date of this on this order is going to be at least 4 months late. And so what happens is it hasn't happened. It isn't like you're going into damage control or firefighting. You actually can say, well, that's not going to work with our advanced work packaging. We need to go in and go assist the supplier. We need to go challenge the supplier, or else we need to find an alternate source in order to keep this from happening. So by knowing something far enough in the future, you can actually prevent future events from happening. So I mentioned it already, there's a Slack environment that you can download the attribute success enablers from all the various paths that you see here on your screen. It allows you to essentially have conversations internally, and then from that you're able to essentially conduct discussions. You can do product development, strategic development strategies, things like that. And at various points as you progress through, you'd be cultivating understanding and insight, and you'd be uploading various solution strategies and issues to the overarching Fiatech Pack Slack environment. So for the leadership forum, and hopefully you're all planning on coming, I'd like you to be thinking about, we're going to be talking about vision and status, hurdles and opportunities, baselining, building and sustaining inertia, and then how do we go about, in cultivating industry engagement and achieving small wins, using small wins. And then if you are the owner EP, who do you believe should be the owner EPC leaders on this? What are the priorities? Be thinking about that. It'll be discussed at the leadership forum. Who should be included? Is there anyone in your organization that you feel should be included in these discussions on PAT number 3? Please sign, and if you haven't done so already, review the success enablers, identify your touch points, provide some comments, and please plan on attending the leadership forum next month. So that's pretty much it, unless there's some questions. The leadership forum is going to take place in New Orleans from September 19th to the 21st at the JW Marriott. If you go to the website, you go to the registration page for Fiatech, you can see the facility. It's beautiful. It's right near downtown New Orleans, Canal Street, I believe. There's no water. It's going to be an opportunity for you to work with your peers and share your perspectives and your passion with peers that have gone through the same process. They may be more evolved than you or less involved with you, but in aggregate, the overall PAT teams move forward. It's working sessions. There's work sessions designed and set aside for each of the productivity advancement targets, and we would really like to encourage you to come. So are there any other comments or questions? Good. Well, that having been said, take care. I'll distribute this, and hopefully you'll be able to attend the conference. Take care. Bye.